This is the United States of America, and this is the Gulf Coast, home to some of America's busiest seaports. In our previous episode, we looked at seaports within Tampa Bay, including other ports in Florida such as Panama City and Pensacola. We then traveled to Mobile and ended our trip in Pascagoula. In this episode, we will be focusing on Louisiana and moving into Texas, as we continue our journey through the Gulf of Mexico. And while you're aboard, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. It helps us to have smooth sailing in the future. This is Seaports of the Gulf Coast, Episode 2. Strategically located on the Gulf of Mexico, we have the deepwater port of Gulfport. The port features space for 10 vessels along 6,000 feet of space, with 110 acres of open storage and 400,000 square feet of covered warehouses. The East Pier Terminal has rail access as well as warehouses, while the West Pier Terminal is home to Dole, Chiquita, and Crowley. The Port of Gulfport was officially established in 1902, even though the area was used prior for offloading and loading goods, especially timber. During southern Mississippi's timber boom, the Port of Gulfport became the world's leading exporter of yellow pine, which honestly isn't saying a whole lot since the South is the only place that grows yellow pine in any large scale, and all this was before the timber industry really started to take shape out west. But due to poor management of resources, the timber industry declined, and the port became a port for importing goods from Central America. Dole and Chiquita each deliver potassium-filled bananas to the port. The port is the second largest green fruit importer in the United States. In 2016, the port received 2 large new gantry cranes to allow for bigger ships to come to the port. Storms have also played a large part in this port's history, such as Hurricane Camille in 1969 or Hurricane Katrina in 2015. Both hurricanes practically leveled the port and its facilities, causing them to have to rebuild each time. Major hurricanes always propose a threat to seaports along the Gulf Coast. In the future, the port plans to increase its water depths from 36 feet to 47 feet. They also got a $15.7 million grant in 2020 to further improve the infrastructure as well as protect them from future storms. And that was the port of Gulfport, Mississippi. Something unique about the Port of New Orleans is its location. Though many associate New Orleans as being a seafront city, it's actually a lakefront and a riverfront city. To the north is Lake Pontchartrain, which is technically an estuary from the ocean, and to the south is the Mississippi River. It is along this river portion that New Orleans industry and port activity exists. And maybe even more shocking is NOLA's port is located about 100 miles up the river from the Gulf. The Napoleon Avenue Container Terminal is the main container terminal for the Port of New Orleans. It has 6 gantry cranes and was able to hit 650,000 TEUs in 2019, which was a record for the port. TEU is short for 20-foot equivalent unit, which is how containers for container ships are measured. New Orleans is also the only international container port in all of Louisiana, which seems kind of hard to believe. But the port focuses more on breakbulk and heavy materials, with 6 dedicated breakbulk terminals and direct-to-barge loading and unloading services. The port is able to take advantage of its river connections. Through the Mississippi and her tributaries, they have roughly 14,500 miles of waterway to use. The port also has a fairly extensive intermodule yard, where products can go directly from a ship to a train car, or vice versa. Their rail company partners allow for product to go as far north as Canada, and all throughout the south. Major materials that the port moves are steel products from Mexico and South America, resins, paper, and pulp. The port also operates the NOLA cruise terminal located near downtown. The port dates back to the 1700s, when the French founded New Orleans and used the riverfront for trade. It wasn't until 1896 that the Louisiana legislature created the Port of New Orleans. The 1940s saw extensive growth, with 18 new riverfront wharfs being built, as well as a new grain elevator. The first cruise ship terminal opened in 1984. In 2004, the first made-for-container terminal was built at the port, the Napoleon Avenue Terminal. But possibly the most most devastating event happened in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina struck the port. It cost over $300 million in damages to repair the port. Despite the wreckage, the port reopened and began to work in just 12 days after the initial hurricane impact and flooding began to recede. Another big thing happened in 2016 for the port when the Mississippi River Intermodule Terminal at Milan Street Wharf opened. As of 2019, the Port of New Orleans was ranked 6th by annual cargo tonnage in the United States, having moved over 92 million tons of goods in just that year alone, meaning that the Port of New Orleans is one of the busiest ports in the Gulf of Mexico. The Port of South Louisiana is a strange one, because unlike most other ports centered around one city or a county, this port actually stretches through 3 Louisiana parishes along the Mississippi River. They are St. Charles Parish, John the Baptist Parish, and St. James Parish. The port stretches for 54 miles along both sides of the river and is headquartered in Laplace, Louisiana. The port starts out about 33 miles upriver from the Port of New Orleans, and in total is about 140 miles from the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. The port is the leading port in the United States, accounting for about 50% of all U.S. grain exports. Along with grain, they also ship maize, soybeans, animal feed, wheat, and rice. And because of this port is the biggest port for bulk cargo in the world. Think about it. All the farmed goods from up the Mississippi River are barged down to this port and shipped to international markets or wherever they may go. But besides grain, the port also handles petroleum imports and has over 40 liquid and dry bulk terminals. The port handles tons of very toxic chemicals, petrochemicals, fertilizers, stone, and steel, and so much more. They also work with 3 different railroad companies to transfer goods to other locations around the country. As of 2021, there were over 3,000 vessels and over 55,000 barges that called on the port for the year. Believe it or not, that's actually a decline over previous years. Total shipping tonnage has also declined over 78 million tons during the past 5 years. As of 2021, though, the port still handled 229 million tons of cargo, making it the second busiest port in the United States by annual tonnage. That's some heavy lifting. But did you know that there's also a dark side to this port's history? The port is part of a section of the Mississippi River known as Cancer Alley.
Life in Reserve, Louisiana, a town of 10,000, the Environmental Protection Agency says has some of the most toxic air in America.
According to the EPA, folks that live across most of Cancer Alley have a 95% higher risk of cancer from air pollution than the rest of America.
More than 100 petrochemical plants and refineries dot this corridor between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. The EPA says the cancer risk here is almost 50 times the national average.
This section of waterway extends from New Orleans to the port of South Louisiana and up to Baton Rouge. This region is known for its heavy air, water, and ground pollution. Along this part of the Mississippi River are several heavy industrial sites that are among the worst polluters in the country. There are over 150 petrochemical and refineries along this stretch of river. Studies, media, as well as documentarians have documented the pollution in this region and the effects not only to the citizens that live here, but also to the wildlife. The area gets the name Cancer Alley because of the abnormally high rates of cancer and other diseases citizens get in this region. Some medical studies claim that the average lifespan is 10 years younger than the national average, with chances of getting a serious disease being over 700 times the national average. The region is known as a sacrifice zone, meaning that the environment is so poor that it's a complete loss. No one is trying to stop or fix what is happening beyond political bloviating. So is anything being done to remedy this? Honestly, not a whole lot. A lot of political theater and a lot of nothing gets done. So in the meantime, the port of South Louisiana will remain a major port with a big economic impact, as well as a big health impact for the region. Louisiana's southernmost port is Port Fourchon. The port sits at the mouth of Bayou Lafourche, and it's like no other port seen so far in this series. Unlike other ports, Port Fourchon is filled with individually leased and independently run docks that feature specialized services and have unique facilities for them. There are cargo docks here, but they also are run by private companies. Over 250 different companies lease space at the port. The port is also significant due to its petroleum industry traffic from offshore oil platforms and drilling rigs. Port Fourchon currently services over 90% of the Gulf of Mexico's deepwater oil production. There are over 600 oil platforms within a 40-mile radius of Port Fourchon. The port is also used as a land base for Louisiana's offshore oil port, aka the Loop, which is a deepwater port in the Gulf of Mexico about 18 miles off the coast of Louisiana. The Loop provides tankers and offloading and temporary storage service for crude oil. Most tankers offloading at the Loop are too large for U.S. inland ports. The Loop handles about 10 to 15% of the nation's domestic oil. Port Fourchon is also used as a supply point for oil rigs, as well as a hub for commercial fishing and normal cargo shipping. From the port, helicopters also take rig workers to their jobs out in the Gulf. Over 15,000 people a month are flown offshore to locations from the port's airport. The port services over 95% of all deepwater energy operations in the Gulf and even refurbishes rigs themselves. The port was established in 1960 and was dreamed to be a port to rake in the bananas from South America and take away traffic from the Port of New Orleans. This didn't work, so over time, infrastructure was built, including roads and docks. The port's location is also quite vulnerable to storms, which have certainly caused issues in the past. Flooding is always a major concern, especially along Louisiana Route 1, which runs level to the sea for much of its route. The state is considering elevating more of this route because if it shuts down, it could have a significant impact on oil transport. As the marshland and swamps around Port Fourchon continue to disappear, it's unknown how significant this port will be in the future. There's only so many things man can do to slow nature's ever-changing course. Nature always wins in the end. Located just inland of the Gulf of Mexico and up the Calcasieu Ship Canal and within Lake Charles is the Port of Lake Charles. The port owns and runs 3 dry bulk terminals, which specialize in petroleum coke, barite, aggregate, grains, and caustic soda. Over in the cargo docks area of the port, they can accommodate up to 12 ships at once, and have 11 transit sheds and 15 warehouses. Within the port's district is also a massive refinery and LNG terminal. Within the port's reach is the Calcasieu Ship Channel, which accommodates various companies and their private docks, which further boosts the port's portfolio of terminal space. Roughly 42,000 local jobs are supported through the port. The principal cargoes having moved through the port's terminals are project cargoes, aluminum, forest products, steel, bulk, grain, other agricultural food products, petroleum coke and other petroleum products, barite, and other related products. In all, they've moved over 11 million tons of cargo in 2020, which is a huge jump up from the previous years. Prior to that, they had been averaging about 5 million tons a year. Port Charles has been a port of call since about the 1800s, but navigation to its location was always difficult because the river was so shallow. It wasn't until 1915 that a proper channel was built over the course of several years to make access to Lake Charles easier by ships. Finally, in 1924, the Lake Charles Harbor and Terminal District was formed, and it has been a port city ever since. During World War II, the port was contracted by the U.S. War Department to store materials and military cargo. In 2022, the port is spending $316 million on new construction and improvements to the port, such as new wharves, dock siding improvements, and some of that money is going to improve the protection from hurricanes and land erosion. Land, air, and water pollution are major concerns with so many chemical facilities in the area. In 2020, Hurricane Laura resulted in major damage to the port and the city. Poisonous chemicals from a chemical plant were released and spread into the air over the city of Port Charles because of the hurricane, and people were advised to stay inside. Other chemicals in the air include chlorine, vinyl chlorine, dioxins, and more. A study in 1998 found that people in the area have triple the normal levels of dioxins in their bodies. The enforcement of pollution controls definitely look lax on the surface. All it takes is a simple drive around the facilities of the port to see something that doesn't look right. Citizens in the area have fought for decades against the heavy industry companies moving in. A major company already bought out an entire town near the port, known as Mossville. The former town site has been bulldozed and turned into a massive industrial plant. So like some other ports in Louisiana, there clearly needs to be some work done here. Regardless, the port is signing on new tenants and has plenty of room to expand. There are several construction projects throughout the port's property. There's a lot of potential here. LNG is the new boom material right now, and the port is capitalizing on it. It will certainly be interesting to see how this port looks in 10 years. We move on from Louisiana and to our first port in Texas, the Port of Port Arthur. While the city of Port Arthur has definitely seen better days, the Port of Port Arthur is improving. The port's focus is break bulk general cargo, but they are capable of heavy project cargo, energy cargo, roll-on roll-off cargo, and limited container cargo. The port has direct access to barge transport, as well as rail services. They are connected to the Kansas City Southern Rail Line, which provides direct intermodule service for the port. A massive expansion to the port happened in the year 2000, which saw the creation of more frontage, storage, and infrastructure improvements to the port. And as of 2022, they're currently working on expanding Berth 6. The port's biggest moment in the spotlight sadly came in 2010, when an oil tanker, the Eagle Atomi, and the tugboat Dixie Vengeance collided. It resulted in 450,000 gallons of crude oil to leak into the Sabine-Neches waterway. This of course resulted in a massive cleanup. The port is also located in a horrible spot as it seems to get hit by hurricanes every time. Hurricane Audrey, Rita, Humberto, Ike, Laura, and so many more. But despite all this, the port continues to be a top player in its area, and with continued expansions, it will hopefully provide good jobs and stop the ongoing decline of downtown Port Arthur. But it certainly won't be easy, because there are several different ports in this small area all competing for the same business, such as our next port. Having moved over 94 million tons of goods this past year alone, the Port of Beaumont is one of the busiest ports in the Gulf. The port is also a hub for the United States Army, as it's home to the 842nd Transportation Battalion, who specializes in port logistical movement. It's the busiest military port in the world. The port is located just about a stone's throw away from the Port of Port Arthur and about 84 miles from the Port of Houston. The port features over 94 acres of open storage, over 570,000 square feet of covered storage, and direct access to the Sabine-Neches waterway. Not to mention direct access to the highway and railroad. Take your choice of 3 major railroad companies: Burlington Northern Santa Fe, Kansas City Southern, and Union Pacific. Overall, the port has 3 major marine terminals and over 1.8 miles of frontage for ships to use. The military plays a large part to this port's success, and especially boosts its numbers when moving all this heavy military equipment. So major exports are military cargo, military vehicles, diesel, gasoline, bagged goods, pretty much everything the US military uses. But then there's also bulk grains and crude oil. The port's large roll-on roll-off dock is vital for the military's movement of vehicles. The port originates to 1908, when there was a 9-foot deep canal through the Neches River to Beaumont, and at this time, the oil industry surrounded Beaumont, much like today, but not as invasive. Of course, over the years, the channel was deepened, and now it is 40 feet deep, and there's currently a project going on right now to deepen it to 48 feet deep. This project cost $1.1 billion and started in 2017 and is expected to finish in about 12 to 15 years. In 1949, the Texas legislature officially made the Port of Beaumont its own entity, and it exists to this day and continues to be a thriving port along the Gulf Coast. And believe it or not, we've reached the end of this episode. We will continue our journey westward looking at ports along the Gulf Coast in the next episode. And remember, if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below, as well as check out the other videos on our channel. And if you feel generous enough, we also have a Patreon account. With that said, this has been episode 2 of Seaports of the Gulf Coast. Thanks for watching, we'll catch you next time. Bon voyage!